Anybody that is familiar with the Assassin's Creed franchise knows the idea of these games is not as simple as it seems on paper. To a newcomer, they may think of Assassin's Creed as a franchise that is known for taking place in all of these fascinating time periods, and that is all. But underneath that very basic idea of what the franchise is, there's a lot more going on. The historical side of the game, the modern day side of the game, the ezio side of the game with sages, pieces of Eden, holograms, vaults and so on, and a constant assassin vs Templar as well as abstergo vs modern assassin conflict among other things. That is Assassin's Creed. I'm sorry, but argue with a wall if you think otherwise. Now when it comes to Assassin's Creed Shadows, the most recent game, I don't dislike the game at all, but I can acknowledge that there's a problem, and a big one at that. And no, I'm not talking about Yasuke or any of the discourse surrounding the game. I'm talking about the actual Assassin's Creed lore, the first civilization, the ezio, the animus, all of the stuff that used to tie the whole series together. In Assassin's Creed Shadows, that's all gone, or at best barely hanging on by a thread, and that is putting it nicely. Since the RPG shift with Origins, Odyssey and Valhalla, I've noticed a pattern. Ubisoft, especially Ubisoft Quebec, is quite clearly trying to make these games more beginner friendly. They want players to be able to jump in without having to know what a piece of Eden is, or why somebody's talking to a hologram of an ezio. I get that, the franchise is huge and complicated, and not everybody wants to read a lore wiki to enjoy a game, but here's the thing. Assassin's Creed as a franchise is and was one of the most unique franchises in gaming, simply because it always stood out for having this very fascinating idea of history and science fiction. This is a franchise where it goes beyond playing within a historical time period living through historical events. Instead, you were uncovering this ancient high-tech civilization that secretly shaped the world. The animus gave context for everything. Even when you were fighting a mythical creature, there was always some sort of explanation. It might have been an ezio artifact, a simulation glitch, or genetic memory trickery. Whatever it was, it still fit into the Assassin's Creed world. And that brings me on to Shadows. This is not so much. You've got a yokai boss fight that never gets explained. You've got this mysterious figure named Kojiro who's supposed to be dead and he's talking to you like a ghost or a god and nobody blinks an eye. There's a glowing deer and a three-tailed fox that we literally see in the living world of Japan. And then there's even the smaller things that nobody really pays attention to, like how Yasuke is able to pull off superhero moves like a Spartan kick on steroids. Now sure, it's fun and I admit I liked playing through it, but there is zero connection to the Assassin's Creed lore. There's no explanation regarding any ezio technology. There's no animus explanation. There is no pieces of Eden. It's basically Ubisoft Quebec's way of saying, magic is real now, deal with it. And that's the main issue. Ubisoft Quebec seem to be moving away from Assassin's Creed's core identity. They're leaning more into this idea of having cool mythology and nothing Assassin's Creed related, and less about the science fiction world building that made the series unique in the first place. This video is about why Assassin's Creed Shadows just doesn't make sense, not as a video game but as an Assassin's Creed game. So yeah, let's break down what's actually going on here and why it feels like Ubisoft are just kind of giving up on the lore. One of the coolest things about the early Assassin's Creed games was how they handled weird or supernatural elements. Like yes, you would see some bizarre stuff, ancient relics with crazy powers, people with godlike strength, even literal quote-unquote gods, but it all had some kind of explanation. The rule was simple: if something seemed magical, it was probably some leftover technology from a super advanced civilization that came before us, aka the ezio, and all of it was being seen through the animus, a machine simulating genetic memories. So everything stayed grounded in this kind of science fiction logic. But ever since the RPG era kicked off with Origins, Ubisoft has been slowly leaning harder into full-on mythology, and not just as a thing in the background. I mean that we now see myths that are now a major part of the story and the gameplay, which honestly I'm not totally against if it's handled with care and explained right. It can be pretty cool, but the way they're doing it lately feels kind of careless, like the rules that used to guide this franchise just doesn't matter anymore. Now this article by Comic Cats is a fascinating read into mythological content in Assassin's Creed, and a lot of what was said actually inspired this video, so I'll leave a link down below to his article. But anyway, let's rewind a bit. So in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, for example, there's a lot of Norse mythology and magic looking stuff, but the game actually puts effort into giving it context. When Eivor sees visions or enters dreamlike sequences, it's tied to her ezio ancestry or something going on in her head. It's not literally Odin showing up. It's Eivor processing genetic memories in a symbolic way. I mean, think about it carefully. When we saw something strange in Valhalla, there was always a reason. Eivor was drugged, Eivor was near an ezio artifact, or the animus was glitching. Stuff like that helped it feel like it still fit within the Assassin's Creed universe. Even when the franchise got more myth heavy with Odyssey, it still respected the core idea. There's always that debate if Odyssey is an Assassin's Creed game, and I honestly get the debate. It's set before the Creed, and there's none of the main conflict. But you know, science fiction wise and EC wise, it is quite literally Assassin's Creed. In Odyssey, you'd fight a Cyclops, a Minotaur, or Medusa. Yes, actual mythical creatures, but there was always an explanation behind it. These were not monsters that were tossed in for fun. You see, after defeating them, what was the item you would always get? It was these prizes, and these sphere-looking ezio artifacts tied directly into the ezio side of the franchise, and that eventually led into the Fate of Atlantis DLC, where the whole simulation/ezio theme took over. This was planned because the DLC released the next year after Assassin's Creed Odyssey came out, so there was something in place for these objects. So yeah, Odyssey may have gone hard into mythology, but it was all still part of the plan, and it's still played by Assassin's Creed science fiction rules. I'll get onto the Assassin's Creed Shadows part very soon, but I need you to know that the franchise has always had tools to deal with fantasy elements without breaking its own universe. Whether that is animus glitches, corrupted data, simulations, it's all been used to add crazy stuff while still keeping things consistent. Yes, it's not classic Assassin's Creed, and I missed that era where it was just peak, but those writers are sadly long gone. Oh, and even those big boss fights in Origins were framed as challenges in the Animus, not actual events in history. We did not fight giant versions of Egyptian gods. It made everything feel like it belonged, even if it was completely over the top. But now, especially in Assassin's Creed Shadows, Ubisoft have let go of that structure. Or maybe it's Ubisoft Quebec, because Mirage had ezio lore and it fit quite well. Maybe Quebec are doing this because they want the games to be more accessible, or maybe they think most players do not care about the lore anymore. Either way, the result is the same. A game that looks like Assassin's Creed on the surface, but doesn't feel like it under the hood. So now let's talk about why Assassin's Creed Shadows makes no sense and has a big problem. Now, if you have played Shadows, you probably come across this random fight where you face off against a literal yokai, which is a supernatural being or a spirit, often associated with monsters and demons in Japanese folklore. It's a cool fight, sure, no doubt, but here's the thing, Assassin's Creed has never just done monsters for the sake of it, as I already explained. There's supposed to be a reason behind the myth. Can somebody explain to me the reason why there was a yokai in the game? In older games, if you forced something that seemed unnatural, there was always some tech or lore explanation behind it. Well, I say that, but thinking of it now, was there anything, supernatural back in the day? I can't really think of much. But my point still stands. Look at Assassin's Creed Origins, look at Odyssey, look at Valhalla. These are recent games. The reasons in these games were explained. Maybe it was an animus glitch. Maybe it was an ezio experiment gone wrong. In fact, take Mirage. Look at Basim with that super fast teleportation assassination thing. Remember before the game came out, there was that argument about how it did not fit. But at least that had a reason. It was the animus not being able to keep up with Basim. So there was always something. Here in Assassin's Creed Shadows, there is nothing. You defeat the yokai and that is all. There's no mention of how it exists. There's no device, no hallucination, no animus corruption. Just congratulations, you killed a demon. And that's Ubisoft Quebec in a nutshell with how they handle the Assassin's Creed lore side of the game. Which, cool. But what is this even doing in an Assassin's Creed game? It feels like Ubisoft Quebec wanted to include something culturally iconic and thought, I know, yokai fight equals badass, and just left it there. There's no effort to tie it to the first civilization. Not even a quick animus is glitching out pop-up to cover their tracks. It's just dropped into the game with no context. And as a longtime fan, surely I can't be the only one that finds this kind of disappointing and somewhat disrespectful. If Assassin's Creed starts treating mythology like it's real magic, then it stops being Assassin's Creed and starts being another fantasy action game. It's weird because this fight could have easily been justified by an illusion, a bio-engineered creature, something left over from the first civilization time, but they did not even try. Now let's get into one of the weirdest and most interesting parts of the game, Kojiro. Now Kojiro isn't a standard NPC in the game, he's a ghost. or maybe a god, depending on how you interpret his inclusion in the game. Throughout your interactions with him, he keeps disappearing and reappearing, saying weirdly prophetic stuff, and most importantly, nobody can see him. You talk to him like he's standing next to you, but to the rest of the world it looks like you're speaking to thin air. And then by the end of that questline, once you bring his family tea set to the collector, it's revealed Kojiro is dead. He's been dead for years. So what have we been talking to this whole time? The most popular theory I think I saw on Reddit, was that it's kind of hinted that he's a kami, a spiritual figure from Japanese folklore. Specifically, I've seen people say that he might be a manifestation of Amano Nushi, the kami tied to the shrine ritual that starts the quest. The priestess straight up says, Amano Nushi has summoned you. And when the ritual ends, that's when we see Kojiro show up. Now that would be fine in a standard fantasy game, but Assassin's Creed is not supposed to have literal ghosts just showing up with no explanation. Remember Odin in Valhalla, an ezio memory bleeds into Eivor's dreams, the Minotaur in Odyssey, a mutated human guarding a piece of Eden. Even hallucinations could be explained by drugs or malfunctioning Animus software. But the way Ubisoft Quebec handled Kojiro is terrible. The game gives us nothing, not even a toss-away line where it could have been related to the shrine being connected to something old, and of course the old would have been a first civilization remnant. I just hate the idea that we're supposed to accept that we've been talking to a ghost this whole time. This sucks because the idea of Kojiro is genuinely great. His themes of grief and revenge, the way he quietly haunts the story, I think is some of the better writing in the game. But it feels like it was pulled out of a completely different franchise and dropped into Assassin's Creed without anybody at Ubisoft Quebec checking if it made sense. If you're going to include a literal ghost in a series where nothing is supposed to be magic, you better have a damn good explanation for it. You know what, maybe that whole situation where before the game came out, it was said that half the team of Assassin's Creed Shadows were junior developers who had never worked on a game before. Maybe it's starting to make sense now, and that's why this game lacks what Assassin's Creed is meant to be. And if you think it ends at Kojiro, then no. Look at Sumi-E, a very harmless and innocent painting minigame. We paint animals for God's sake. There shouldn't be anything wrong with this, right? But there is to me. There's a silver fox with 3 tails and a glowing antlered deer. There are a few other creatures that are literally physically impossible to exist in this feudal Japan setting. Yes, it's a nod to Japanese tradition, but I'm sorry, this is a video game. I hate Ubisoft Quebec's approach of making everything 100% historical and 100% respectful. There's no build up to why these creatures exist in the game, and there's no explanation afterward. You see a magical animal with supernatural elements to them and you paint them, and then it's done. The game never tells you if these are hallucinations, if they're tied to, I don't know, some hidden piece of Eden that projects these animals, if they're even real in the Animus memory. But then again, whose Animus memory are we looking through? It's a pattern with this game. The developers want to use mythology and cultural symbolism in creative ways, which is totally valid, but they're not taking this time to make it fit into the Assassin's Creed world. Again, another smaller thing but still a problem. I love Yasuke in this game. I genuinely think he's one of the best written characters we've had in a while. But there's a problem. How is he able to not only do a Spartan kick, which is fine, but to execute one that is physically impossible to do? Now the reason this is a problem is because look at Cassandra. She can do a Spartan kick, but again, the reason she can do it is because of lore. Cassandra has ezio DNA, and she wields a spear of Leonidas, which was a piece of Eden that gave her insane superhuman strength. Yasuke, on the other hand, is apparently a very strong man. There's no mention of him having special lineage. There's no artifact in his possession. There's no, side plot suggesting he's been enhanced or is using first civilization technology. He's just a historical figure turned action hero with no science fiction explanation for the godlike Spartan kick. And yes, this might not bother 90% of people, but if you have any interest in the AC lore, it's hard not to notice how out of place it feels. Even if they wanted to give Yasuke some over-the-top combat mechanics, there are ways to explain it. Maybe he unknowingly uses a piece of Eden. Maybe his strength is being exaggerated by the Animus to fill in the gaps in the memory. Which again, whose memory? Nobody knows. Ubisoft Quebec did not even try with the established lore for the game. Okay, so what was the point of this video? At the end of the day, Assassin's Creed Shadows is a decent game. The world is stunning, the combat, the stealth and so on is pretty good. But I'm not blind to realize how lacking of Assassin's Creed this game is. Ubisoft Quebec clearly put a lot of effort into making the game feel culturally rich and visually stunning. But somewhere along the way, they dropped the ball on the one thing that's always held this series together, which was the lore. Now, I don't mean lore as in, backstory lore. I mean the actual science fiction framework work that's supposed to explain the unexplainable. This franchise has always had a rule. Myth is real, but it's not magic. It's science, misunderstood. It's ezio artifacts, anime stuff, or genetic memory surfacing in weird ways. That's what made Assassin's Creed feel unique. I still love this series. I want to see it get back on track, and that's why honestly I'm really looking forward to Assassin's Creed Hexe. Check out this video I made if you want to know why I think this in depth. It's being handled by Ubisoft Montreal, not Ubisoft Quebec, and more importantly, Darby McDevitt is back. He's somebody who gets what Assassin's Creed is supposed to be. He's handled some of the most lore-heavy games in the franchise, Brotherhood, Revelations, Valhalla, and he always makes sure the ezio stuff has depth and relevance. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, do be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one.